Hey guys, this is Eve. Thanks for tuning into my YouTube channel. This channel is dedicated to exploring various topics of the metaphysics and looking at them from a very occult standpoint. I tell people that my videos are for a very small fraction of the world's population. They're referred to in the Bible as the 144,000. And so these are people that are Rh negative. So if you're an Rh negative, you represent 15% or less of the world's population. If you are a black Rh negative, then you're 4% or less. Okay, so I really want to focus on Northwest. Actually, I've been spending quite a bit of time with Northwest channel, okay, in her astral body or whatnot, and I'm trying to figure out when she actually came about. What sparked this actual interaction with Northwest? I think it's been like maybe over a week now, actually. And so she came in and she I'm trying to figure out why she came in. Or like, because it seems like it was kind of abrupt in terms of her coming in or what have you and interacting with me. It wasn't necessarily something that was expected, and so I was kind of caught off guard by it, so to speak. But she had a lot to say and what have you, and so I thought that it would be really beneficial to disseminate this information from her astral body. And she's a very domineering astral body, okay, and she's a very good teacher, actually. She's like, your ego is not going to be anywhere in this because she's like that teacher. You come to her classroom and the objectives are on the board and the materials are there, and so she's like, this is the objective and this is how you're going to learn things and this is how you're going to be assessed. Like, she's very thorough. And so she's very much thorough, no nonsense, you know what I mean, like type person, very commanding type of presence, and very, very masculine, very manly. And so I was kind of caught off guard by that because her astral body looks a lot like her mother, okay? She looks a lot like Kim Kardashian. And in fact, she reminds me a lot of Wonder Woman, right? The woman that, the actress that played Wonder Woman, her name is Gal Gadot. And so she reminds me a lot of her. Very, has a domineering, more masculine presence, but she's very aesthetically beautiful, okay? So she is a good conglomeration of the energies of the egos of her mother and her father, okay? But anyway, she came in because of the fact that she has concerns about her father, and and also concerns about her and how she incarnated, okay? So the thing is that she incarnated really as a sacrifice to her father. Her father was the initiator in terms of having her incarnate, okay? And so the thing is that I said to myself, I'm trying to figure out how to approach this this channel, because there's so many different facets of it or whatnot, okay? She came in as an aid to her father, okay? So that Kanye West suffered a I guess what you would say, it was like a breakdown, like a nervous breakdown or what have you, at a certain point in his career. And so around this time, this is when he and Kim had Northwest. And so she came in, the soul came in as an aid to her father, because her father, she and her father were married actually in a past life, like many lives ago, okay? So it's nothing romantic now. It's not like Prince William and Meghan Markle, where they were married within the past, the life before this life, okay? So Kanye West and his now daughter were married like lifetime upon lifetime upon lifetime ago. And so they had established this this devotion, okay? And so after being devoted to each other for so many years, and having so many lifetimes apart, she decided to reincarnate, seeing how he was, how things were going with him upon the earth plane. And really looking at it, you know, she took a really shitty deal because she's a Pisces ascendant. And so when it comes to Pisces ascendants, you know, we see them in the what is it? The esoteric, like, you know, arena, basically as sacrifices. Okay, so she's a sacrifice. Pisces is associated with Christ. So by the time you make it to Pisces, or the 12th house of the zodiac, the ego has been pressed out and all you have is the subconscious. And so they unleash the subconscious upon the consciousness to crucify you. Okay, so your subconscious is things that are hidden from your conscious awareness, and those things are they rush upon you upon ascension. And so you know, but she did this and she offered herself up as her father because she loves her father so much. And so she really wanted to make sure that she could balance his energies, okay, as a soulmate. Okay, so also she's like, you know, I'm Miss Westie, I'm your bestie. That really is his bestie. That's his wife from years and years and years and years and years ago. Okay, so the romantic energies have had time to subside. You see what I'm saying? Like I would talk about how like Master Yeshua and his mother were lovers in past lives, but they have had so many lives apart that those romantic tendencies have subsided. Okay, but there is still a strong Oedipus complex from a subconscious standpoint because all of your lifetimes are, you know, subconsciously banked. Okay. So she came as an aid to him. And so really in so many ways, like if he had not had this child, really specifically North, I know he has other children, but he likely would have transitioned out. Okay, so North is somebody who was there to stabilize things and to get things in order from a more spiritual, energetic standpoint in order for him to be stable. Okay, now in saying that or what have you, and I'll come back to Kanye West in a little bit, you know, with because Jennifer Lopez had come into the channel to pretty much give me a perspective in terms of you know, the situation involving Kanye West and Northwest. Okay, and so she was really informative about helping me to understand the entertainment business from a more esoteric standpoint. Okay, but anyway, you know, looking specifically at North herself, like I said, she's a Pisces ascendant, and so Pisces ascendants are very empathic. And so, you know, you guys, I've talked about, if you follow my channel, which I know you already do, but, you know, following my channel, we talk about empaths, and empaths are esoteric or allegorically depicted by Jesus in the Bible when it says Jesus took on the sins of the world. All right. So, people, typically everyone falls on a certain spectrum, you know, on the spectrum of empathy, right? You have really narcissistic people, and then you have people who are empaths like me who can take on people's physical symptoms. Like when my father was in the hospital, I started taking on his physical symptoms. So I had too much, you know, my empathy level was, you know, on steroids. And so I really had a hard time trying to ground myself or whatever the case is. But, you know, typically everybody has a sense of empathy. Even if you're a really evil, narcissistic motherfucker, you know, like if your dog were hurting, or your mom or your dad, or, you know, somebody that you care about, you know, if that person hurt, you'd be hurting as well. You see what I'm saying? But empaths, they actually, you know, take this to another level. And so being a Pisces ascendant in Western astrology, she's extremely empathic. In fact, on top of being a Pisces ascendant, she has her Mercury and her Venus, right, in Cancer. And Cancer is about the emotions, and so Mercury is how you think, whereas Venus is, you know, what you're attracted to and what you love. And so her heart and her head correspond to Cancer, which are the feelings. Okay, but you know, in her family, within her family dynamic, you know, Cancer doesn't feel at home, you know what I mean? Because her family is very much a public family, and, you know, they're in Hollywood. Hollywood is a lot about glamour and how things are, the appearances and that type of thing. And so it doesn't really delve so much into the emotions. You know, you can, you know, I know that, Keeping Up with the Kardashians is like it's a TV show, but there is some validity to it, I'm sure. And so a lot of times you see that, the emotions aren't necessarily as honored as much as the glamour and the work ethic involving the show and the business itself and the brand. Okay. So her placement is not necessarily the best, but the reason why she incarnated into that family as well is because of the fact that she subconsciously is a lot like her mother. And so, she has in her Western chart, she has Lilith in what is it? In Cancer, okay? And so Lilith in Cancer, and is Lilith, I've talked about it because I have Lilith in Libra. And her mom has Lilith in Libra as well. I believe in her Western chart. I'm not sure Western or Vedic, but anywho, Lilith is the deep subconscious, what the world considers to be the perverted aspect of your personality. Okay, and so, with having Lilith there, Lilith perverts Cancer, and Cancer is seen as the mother, and so this is like the bad mother, okay? And so you've seen North sometimes talk about her mom, like, Mom, you're so, concerned about your looks, and you're concerned about your friends, and, this and the other, more concerned about, your kids and that type of thing, and, but the thing about it is that North's astral body is very similar to that. And so in the deep subconscious, because she is like that, the mom is a twin. And so although she and the ego of the mom conflict, the mom represents this aspect of her on the astral plane. And so although she may conflict with her mother, it's very comforting to have her mother there because she represents who she is on the astral plane when she goes to sleep at night, the person that she dies to. And so because of that, having her mom there and really getting into the energy of her mother is very important. And so she is 13 years old now, and so as a 13-year-old, she's hit adolescence, and adolescence is a recalibration of the soul where you're going from being a child to being an adult. And so she felt coming to to me as a medium that is important for her to establish this sense of self coming out of adolescence into adulthood, so she can actually regain the soul and a lot of what she's given off to her parents, especially her father, coming in as a sacrifice as a Pisces ascendant. Okay, so yeah, she's a lot like him. And so we know the Kardashians. They're a family that's built on the foundation of matriarchy. And so as matriarchs, the women are the ones who, have the careers and that type of thing, and the ones who kind of call the shots, so to speak, whereas the men are the ones who kind of sit back and, take cues from the women, you know what I mean? And so, North, her astral body is a lot like that, like very, very, business-like, you know what I mean? Like a woman, but it's like a man in a woman's body kind of thing. Like when she came in, it was like, kind of like kiss the ring type shit. You know what I mean? Like she's very commanding, and very intimidating. I found her energy to be very intimidating, and so it was hard for me to kind of get into it, to kind of bypass my ego and to the intimidation aspect of it, because it's a very strong presence. And so one thing I noticed about her astral body is that it's very much dominated by the physical. So she's very well versed in physicality. And so a lot of times when I would do blogs about her astral body, I would actually do blogs with belly dancers, right? So belly dancers represent the soul. The belly, the soul, the solar plexus, which is the will and desire of God. Solar means sun. Is Jesus in the occult. And so belly dancers are very important, especially for a Pisces ascendant. And so the belly dancer works the solar plexus and root chakra aspect of the body. And so she's very much lacking in soul, because that's what a Pisces ascendant is. A Pisces ascendant actually is a sacrifice and a service to others. A Pisces ascendant isn't necessarily somebody that has a whole lot of soul themselves, especially with other placements she has, with her Cancer placements with Mercury and Venus, and, Lilith in Cancer. She has some water in there, whatnot. And there's another placement, right? Where, she's lacking. She's lacking in soul. And so that's why it's very important that, her parents and the people who are around her help to reinforce her soul, and to kind of, gain some self-awareness of themselves, to know that it's important for her to gain a sense of self. And she really told me that it's very important at a certain point in her life where she spends some time away from the limelight, away from being in Hollywood. And she kind of goes back and forth, I suppose. So like when she's in school, I guess she's like, in Hollywood, but on the weekends and stuff like that, she does her appearances and this, that, and the other, yada, yada, yada. But, maybe during the summer months, right, she is in Guatemala feeding the orphans, or she's working for the Peace Corps. I think you can join the Peace Corps like 16 years old or some shit like that. So, she really needs some time to kind of regain the soul, because being in Hollywood is really a soulless place. You see what I'm saying? You're really around people who are lacking in soul. People sell their souls, you know what I mean? And so they belong to a brand. They belong to, a production company or something like that. And so those people, dictate what other people do in Hollywood. They call the shots. And so there's very seldom people around there that have a sense of self, including her family members. And so already having a disposition to be lacking in soul and being in that environment, it will cause her to have to be able to recalibrate her soul by being out of that environment and spending time, meditating and doing yoga and that type of thing. And so I see her doing a lot of yoga and very rigorous yoga. You see what I'm saying? Because she's a Pisces ascendant, it's very important for her to do a type of yoga that's really painful at one point. She's young now, but as she gets to be like, 15, 16 years old and forward, she needs to be doing a type of yoga that really causes pain to the body. Like she's into her piercings and stuff like that. And so she's already trying to kind of like, in an indirect way, kind of integrate that pain aspect into the body, because she's so psychological, you know what I mean? And so kind of swayed by other people's emotions and their souls and their agendas, or whatever the case is, and kind of being a part of that. And so that's why it's important for her to be able to do a type of yoga that will, help her to get into the body and to bring her down from her psyche. Because like as a Pisces and Pisces ascendant, like I said, they're associated with Christ in the occult. And so they're ones to get crowns of thorns. You see what I'm saying? And so you don't want a crown of thorns, you want a crown of glory. And so, in having a crown of glory, it causes you to have to retreat to get out of people's force fields and out of people's energies fields or whatnot, so you can actually determine who you are, and how you're feeling. And, it's interesting because once she does that, and she's kind of like going back and forth between Hollywood and then a place where she has more solitude and that type of thing. And I do mean away from Hollywood. So it's not like, oh, she has her own like, little temple or her little sacred, altar or whatever. No, like she needs to be away from Hollywood altogether. And, it's very unfortunate that, Kanye West's mom, is not with him anymore. And, I feel like this would be a good opportunity for a family member, like someone like his mom, like if his mom were alive, to take her, every summer to Thailand, or take her to, whatever, what I mean? Take her to retreats or whatnot, where, she's doing things to, help others, right? It kind of goes along with her Pisces ascendant. Helping others and being empathetic, but also taking that time away from that environment of soulless people, a place where people lack soul, for her to regain her soul and for her to meditate, to do her her yoga, her strenuous, intense yoga, to do her belly dancing. I feel like belly dancing is a very good activity for her, like I said before, because it works the solar plexus and the root chakra region, and so it takes you away from your mind and brings you down into those lower chakras, okay? And so I feel like studying every vertebrae in the body really helps to to really kind of get her focused in the body, doing things like swimming and sports, and maybe not necessarily being on a team, because, a lot of times people are on teams because, they want a scholarship, to get money to go to school, but, that's not an issue for her. So she just wants the athleticism and the physicality associated with it. But, swimming and sports and that type of thing, gaining a sense of self. Because looking at her south node, her north node, what is her north node? What's the opposite of Taurus? Her south node is really about self, and Taurus is about the earth. It's about, your self, I guess what you call sense of self and that type of thing, and manifesting and that type of thing. And so her south node is really much about that. So instead of just focusing on the north node, I would definitely, with her, because she's a Pisces ascendant, go into her past lives and things that she's been really good at, which is manifesting. And this is associated with her mom, okay? Because her mom is really good at manifesting. She's a very savvy businesswoman, and so this is an idol for North. And so I think it's very important early on that she does establish herself like a business or something like that. She starts to accrue, revenue and money, and maybe she can open her own nonprofit or something where she's gaining her own money and she's not getting money from her parents. But this actually goes to her south node to actually reestablish the sense of self in this incarnation that she's had in previous incarnations, to stabilize her energies. Okay. I'm trying to figure out what else I want to focus on with her. I talked about how her astral body is a lot like her mom. I talked about how she's very masculine, and she has a balance between her mom and her dad in terms of the astral body. She needs to reestablish that here on Earth. Her weight. Yeah, I want to talk about her weight, because she has picked up some weight. And like during this time or whatever, as kids, during adolescence, your body is transitioning from being a child to being an adult. And I feel like she may eat a little bit more because of the fact that she's trying to get grounded. Okay. So this is what we do, especially Pisces ascendants. Pisces ascendants may do things like eat, and when she becomes of age, become more sexually active. And this happens because you're trying to put yourself back into the body, because your energies are swayed by other people's energies. You see what I'm saying? And so I feel like, once she starts to do that rigorous yoga, and she starts to do like belly dancing and getting more into sports and swimming and that type of thing, then her weight will actually come down a lot more. She won't want to eat as much. And, I'm not sure if she eats very much at all, but, I feel like the astral body is saying that her weight, or maybe the, the ego. The ego may be concerned about these things or whatnot. And it really, she's very young, so she's a kid. And, Hollywood and, the media is very, like, evil, whatever the case is, and judgmental, even for children, But, seeing she's in a family with people who have these, very sculpted and chiseled bodies, and, they have a lot of plastic surgery and stuff like that, and they do a lot of cosmetic procedures and things like that to get that particular body. And so I think that she might feel a little bit pressured, or I don't know, like she may have some type of feelings, associated with that, because of the industry that, her family is in and the people that she's around. or whatnot. But, I feel like, even at a young age, because, she's very wise, even at a young age. She's a Pisces ascendant. So, Pisces ascendant, like my daughter in Western astrology, she's a Pisces, sun, actually. So she's extremely old soul. She's my elder, and in the astral plane. And so, I think for souls like this, they really are wise beyond their years. Like a lot of people, like in the media, have said that Northwest is very grown, or looks very grown and older. But really, that's a god. When you see people like a Pisces ascendants and Pisces suns, associated with Christ, that's why like people, like Christians, they have like the fish on the back of their cars. They have like Jesus or Christ, right, written in it. These are gods that are walking among you. Do you see what I'm saying? So she's going to have to open her eyes to the truth about, where she is, and, everything that glitter ain't gold. You know what I mean? So the people that she's looking at who have these chiseled bodies or whatnot, who have to like do these cosmetic procedures and things, she will later have those things without having any cosmetic procedures. Okay? So she'll have like, this perfectly sculpted body, but people will have to keep having procedures to upkeep those things, and it's not necessarily natural, but she'll have those things naturally. So she has to give herself a break to know that she's special, and that her energies are special, and that she's a god among men. And so as a Pisces ascendant, she's going to do things to try to ground herself, and so she will progress more into having more control over her energies, to where she will be able to have the body that she desires. And it's not to desire a body that is thin, but to desire a body that that you want, and that you truly desire, as opposed to desiring something that other people want, what they desire, and desire a body that's healthy, and something that that, like I said, you desire. Is not based upon you assimilating into your environment. I don't see this as somebody who has cosmetic surgery on their face. Okay, she may want to have procedures done, but the astral body highly goes against her having any type of cosmetic surgery on her face. As melanated people, we don't really necessarily heal as people who are not melanated. And so because melanin actually has a lot to do with the healing process, typically people of color don't necessarily have the success that that people who have lighter pigmentations. Okay, so I would just stay away from her face. Like, don't do anything to her face. Like, I mean, that's not my choice, whatever the case is. But, if it were me, if it were up to me, she would have nothing, absolutely nothing done to her face. You know what I mean? She's a melanated person, and, a lot of melanin helps you to age more gracefully, especially if you know how to nurture your melanin and that type of thing. Okay? So I would, advocate that she kind of stay away from that, and to, find natural ways to be able to maintain an upkeep of her appearance. Okay? But, for her to not focus so much on that. We all, when we were younger, had issues, in adolescence. Like me, I had, a face full of acne. It was horrible. Like, I had bumps on top of bumps on top of bumps. And, I used to cake on makeup, or whatever the case is, because I felt so bad about, my facial appearance. And now I know why, because, hormonally speaking, I was abused so much. And so that abuse really kind of threw off my the chemicals in my body. And so this kind of precipitated a whole lot of skin issues and stuff like that, among other things that I was experiencing. And also what is it, I had issues like with my breasts. Like, it was crazy, because like I have like really big areolas, I have really big breasts, but I didn't, my breasts did not grow into my areolas until I was like, 14, 15 years old. You know what I mean? And so I would look at myself in the mirror, and I would say, wow, that looks really weird and strange. You know what I mean? And so I feel like, a kid growing up in that, having to go through adolescence, on top of that, being in the spotlight, really is very difficult. And so I feel like, during this time or whatever the case is, she just needs to tell people to kiss her ass. Basically, like, she doesn't care. She doesn't care about, adhering to certain beauty standards or assimilating to other standards that other people are, in her circle, including her family and friends, that they, assimilate to, whatever the case is. Because, when you're a Pisces ascendant and, she has, what is it? She also has Neptune and Pisces in the first house. She's in a league of her own. You know what I mean? And so I feel like this type of person, if she's not careful, she can lose all sense of self. When you have Pisces, Neptune and Pisces, that's double illusion. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of subconscious tendencies that kind of govern the conscious ego. And the ego doesn't necessarily know why they're doing certain things, but it's subconscious tendencies from previous lives, and also picking up the energies of other people. And so I kind of basically symbolize Pisces and Neptune and Pisces as like a Nightmare on Elm Street, where like you see like the people, they would wake up and they would think that they're awake, but they're actually still dreaming. And so that is what Pisces, Neptune and Pisces is really like. And so sometimes it's very difficult for people like this to see things in a more rational sense, okay? And also, to people like this can actually be very susceptible to cults and stuff like that, It's like, oh, your family doesn't honor your Mercury and your Venus and Cancer and your emotions, and so we love you, we care about you. And a lot of times these cults, they actually have ideologies that really sound really attractive, especially to people who are trying to find themselves, who have these debilitating placements in their natal chart, who are in environments that doesn't really nurture their sense of self. And so they seek that sense of self elsewhere. And so people take advantage of them, and so they can get themselves in a whole lot of bullshit because of their predisposition, such as in this case with her, Neptune and Pisces, okay? So, I really want to talk about that and how, she has to be very careful with that placement. It's a very debilitating placement that makes it very difficult for you to see things in a more rational sense. And so it's very important for her to protect her feelings and to honor her feelings, but not to let people, like really, dictate how she feels. You know what I mean? To have a strong sense of self, to where she's like, okay, I have this kind of like energetic bubble that's not going to allow people to penetrate it. This is how I feel, this is how I want to feel. And so, as Pisces, we tend to kind of feel how other people feel. So like, say, like if, our puppy died or something like that, but somebody came and they won the lottery, and, we're happy. And so we're like, well, we shouldn't be happy because our puppy died, right? So we need to honor our feelings, to say, hey, I understand that this is something that you're joyful about, but this is I'm going through something that I'm sad about. And so I'm not going to allow your feelings to jump onto me. I'm going to honor my feelings. And so that's sometimes very hard to do. And people really use and deplete the energy of Pisces because, Pisces are always used to co-sign other people's feelings and to empathize with people and to make them feel better about themselves. You see what I'm saying? And so I feel like, it's important for her to have healthy boundaries, and to really, even, while she's in Hollywood, to really have a place for her to retreat within Hollywood as well, to have her own sanctuary, so she can go to a place where she can,